Hey everyone, it's Mr. Sud coming at you with a new lesson on APCSA, talking about Unit 4, Lesson 6 in code.org, where we are learning about object aliases and how to use the basically dot equals method. So here we go. To get started, essentially what we're going to do is first thing I want to show you, and I'm going to show you the slides, is this idea of what's the difference between the double equals sign and the dot equals method. First off, the basic way I can explain it is let's assume we have two shoe objects that we're creating. One is the first shoe, one's called the second shoe. Okay, as you can see, both shoes have some sort of argument of 10. Let's assume that they're red shoes, size 10. Well, in this case, since we have two different objects, although they have the same attributes, they're going to go ahead and live in a different storage area. Therefore, when you use the double equal sign, it's going to return false. So looking at these shoes, they are at different storage locations. Therefore, when you use the double equal sign, it returns false. If, however, they were the same object, maybe called something else, then they would be equal to each other. So here's a situation where we have a dot equals, and that's the method we're going to use to see if two objects are equivalent or not. They have the same attributes is what we're looking for. Okay. So what we're going to do, part of what we're understanding in this lesson specifically is when do we use the double equal sign and do we use the dot equals method? And then we're going to need to learn how to override an equals method. And I'm going to show you how to do that. It is kind of complicated, but if you go through a few times, you'll get the gist of it. Okay. I'm not going to worry about aliasing, but basically that just means two objects that have different names. The same object that has two different names. Okay, so for an alias, basically, again, like I said, they're going to have two different names, but they are pointing to the same object. So you'll notice that we have a painter that spawns. This is all slides from code.org, and I think it's well done. Amy is instantiated, and basically the location and y for x and y are both 0, facing east, and we have no paint remaining. Well, if I then also make a new painter called Rosie and just assign it the value of Amy, which is the object, then guess what? They become aliases of each other. Because why? Well, when I talk about Rosie, we have to basically talk about the same painter object as Amy, right? They're all the same thing. So, one of the things you got to learn though is, and this is kind of different, we're used to kind of working with different classes. In one of the previous lessons, I talked to you about the math class. So, math class is one of those things I call the God tier class. It's just pre-baked into Java. It's just there. You can see the documentation under java.lang. I believe object is another superclass. And what's really important to understand is that um, any object you create, right, which is a lot because where this is all object-oriented programming, is going to go ahead and fall under that object class. So it's almost like saying if I was trying to study cats, right? Kind of the overarching thing we know about kitty cats is that they're all part of living things, right? So object class is that general. So anytime we spawn an object or instantiate an object, they will automatically come from the object class. Now you can tell it, hey, I made this new class called painter and they are a painter object, but they will also share the superclass attributes of object. One of the main things we've been working on that we haven't really talked about explicitly is the toString. So whenever you use the toString method and we kind of talk about, remember it brings together like if you want to print a certain object or the results, we've been overriding the toString method. So that's kind of cool that we've been doing, just never really cared to talk about, I guess, in code.org. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the equals method as well. I'm going to go through these slides and then kind of the idea is then I'll show you the code. Okay, so we have an equals method. It's pre-baked into the Java or into the object superclass, right? And again, anytime you instantiate an object, it'll have these attributes. So these are all available to it. So if we take a look at this case, code.org gives us an example where Amy is a new painter that spawned. Okay, Rosie is also another new painter we instantiated at 0, 0 facing east with no units of paint. So what I'm going to do in this last line is we're going to create a new variable called result. It's a Boolean data type, and it's going to store whatever the result is from comparing Amy to Rosie. Okay. And this is only going to return true if two reference variables are aliases of each other. In other words, the dot equals method does the exact same thing of a double equals sign. Now you might be asking, Southard, how come we've been able to use the dot equals method before? Well, the difference is we've kind of tricked the dot equals a little bit because remember we wrote accessor methods. So if I say get name, get attack power or whatever. So one of the examples I used earlier, which is in a different lesson, is code.org had you create a Pokemon class, and they had a separate Pokedex class to basically create a one-dimensional array holding Pokemon objects. So a Pokemon object could be like a Squirtle with 500 CP, could be a Pikachu with 400 CP, so on and so forth. That's a Pokemon class object. Okay. We're going to store those in a 1D array, and it's all created within the Pokedex class. But recall that in the Pokedex class, we made a 1D array that's facing or pointing towards the Pokemon class, right? Because it's going to hold those objects. When we did that and we were going through the array of Pokemon objects, we used an accessor method to grab the name or say the attack value, and then we could use the dot equals method. We were able to get away with that because we were comparing the return of, the name, let's say, or the combat power for each object and compare them. When you're comparing the attack values for two different objects, it'll return true. Why? Because the numbers are the same. At least that's my understanding of it. Okay, but here what we're going to do is we know that if you just release the dot equals method, in this case, without any accessor methods or anything, you're going to get a false every time. Unless we spawned Amy as some sort of alias of Rosie or vice versa. So what we're going to learn in this one, and the best way I can explain it to you, I'll do a separate demo to show this once I get to the code, is if we want to compare specific attributes of an object, we need to override that equals method. Again, the object class gives you this public boolean equals object obj method. It's written in there, it's pre-baked. We can't mess with that code. But because all of the objects we instantiate or spawn are going to belong to the object class, right, as a superclass, we can actually bring that method into that new class I'm typing, say this painter or, Pokemon or whatever, and I can actually override and basically hijack that method. So next time I spawn anything from that, say, Pokemon class, I can go ahead and when I use the dot equals method, it's going to use what I did with it when I hijacked it. Okay. So I'll go ahead and show you this in the code, just to kind of show you what's going on. The main thing I want to show you here is kind of the entirety of the code. Okay. I'm going to try and hover over this real quick. Code.org is pretty slick. They show you a couple of brand new keyword, and it's part job of me as a teacher to kind of explain what's happening as best I can. Okay. So first things first, when we have these, this is kind of the overall template you will use to override the equals method from the object class. Whatever class you're in, Painter, Painter Plus, whatever it may be, Pokemon, you're going to go ahead and write public boolean equals object other, right? Or whatever name you want to call it. This is going to bring in that same equals method that was coded in the object class. So it brings it over again. So you're basically creating a copy. You're going to need two if statements, and then we can go ahead and talk about what to return. The first one right here that my mouse is pointing to is what we've done earlier. It's using the double equals sign to basically check, hey, are these two objects the same? Do they are in the same storage area? Therefore, are they aliases? If that's true, go ahead and return true, right? And then we don't need to do anything else. In the second block that you can read from the PowerPoint slide too, remember the exclamation point in coding in Java means not. Okay. You'll notice that there's this keyword or this word other. That's the object that's being fed in as a parameter. This is a new keyword called instance of in Painter. So and it's the not of that. Okay. So if it is not an instance of Painter, then return false. What does that mean? So going back to instance of, right? So when we create objects, they are typically instances of whatever the class is. So if I'm dealing with the Painter class or worried about, if I'm trying to compare two different objects, let's say, right, their attributes. If I have a Pokemon object and I'm trying to compare it to a Painter object, well, there's no need to talk about combat power because the Painter doesn't have any combat power, as far as I know, right? They have units of paint they're able to take, but they're not necessarily fighting, right? They're painting. So in that case, I know these two aren't related to each other, so I'm going to go ahead and return false. So that's an if statement we're going to check with. Then if both these two if statements aren't triggered, the only other possibility that remains is this last part, which is we're going to have to create a new Painter object, if you will, And remember with the parentheses, this means it's casting that painter class onto that parameter that came in as other. And I'll explain to you with a quick demonstration what that means. And then finally, we can go ahead and do a return to evaluate whether the using this keyword, right? That's the current object I'm comparing, this X location, is the same as whatever came in that other painter X location. I'm going to do a quick demo. I'm going to pause this for a sec so I can go ahead and set it up. Okay, so now you should be able to see, hopefully, just my little video here of various objects that I have. So I want to show you a quick demo on how do we override that last slide that I showed you with the object. So we have four items here. We have a black pen, a reddish pen, a die, and a ruler. Okay. All of these are objects. I want to basically, so when I use the dot equals method and with the template that I just showed you, right, with the two if statements and the return, I want you to see for yourself like how this actually works. So I'm going to go ahead and use that red pen. Okay, so it's a nice little one of my favorite pens. And I'm going to evaluate basically, is there another pen? So if I selected an object that has the same color or not, that's what I'm going to look for. You'll notice that none of these will match, but if I look at these, the two items that are basically the same are these pens. They are both pen objects. One is red and one is black. Okay. So no matter what, we're going to return false, but I want to show this to you. So when I override that object method for equals, the parameter is going to be one of these objects. Let's say I'm comparing a ruler to a pen. Okay, so we know, you and I both know that these are not the same thing, obviously. But remember, these are both objects. One's a ruler, one's a pen. So the first if statement that I showed you just a couple seconds ago is it's gonna, let's assume this is the object that I have in my hand. I want to compare it to whatever comes in. So I'm first thing I'm going to evaluate is this new object the same object as what's in my hand? The answer is obviously no. They're not stored in the same place. They're not the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to skip that if part. The second block of if statement I showed you is going to compare, hey, is this another instance of a pen class? And the answer is no, right? So then I can go ahead and return false here. Now let's assume for a second that somehow these were related. Okay. Once I get to the last part of the code, let's say somehow a pen and a ruler are loosely related. Actually, let me go ahead and use something else real quick. I'll use a marker. Maybe I'll use one that's a different color. So here, I'll just use a black Sharpie. Okay, so maybe they are loosely affiliated. Maybe the pen is a subclass of a Sharpie marker class. Okay, let's just assume that. Well, then the only thing I can do at the very end is I'm going to go ahead and compare these two. Okay. But remember, when I ran the equals method, the parameter took in an object class object. So by the time we get to that last bit of code, I'm going to show you that again in about 10 seconds. We have a problem in that both of these are going to be the same. This is going to compare a pen object to just a regular old object. So what I need to do is I need to basically recast this or reclassify it as some sort of pen object to then compare the colors. If I don't do that, then we really can't distinguish the difference between these three as objects, if that makes sense. So again, the last bit of logic that happens is by the time I get through the two if statements, when I get to this point, I need to essentially reclassify or cast these as a pen object. And then I'm able to check whether the attributes or the values of those attributes are going to be the same or not. Okay, I'm going to pause here and then go back to the slides. Okay, so now that I just went to the code just to show you this. Let's take a look at what code.org gives us in terms of what we're able to take a look at. Let me go ahead and zoom in because it's obviously a little small. Okay, so you can see here the use of the double equal sign. I just want to show you real quick the method that's being used here, which isn't here. We're going to override the dot equals method in a minute. Let me go ahead and go to one of the practice ones just to kind of speed it up because I am talking a lot. Let's go to Disney characters. Okay, we did this in class, but I'll show it to you again. We also did poems. So what we're doing here with code.org is we're trying to figure out, hey, if I well, I'll just show you real quick. We have three of these different objects that are created, or excuse me, 1D arrays that are created. They're going to have the title of the Tinkerbell movies, the Elsa movies, and the Simba movies. Okay, we create a new so those are just string arrays. Okay, we then create a character object called Tinkerbell. And if you look at the character object, you can go ahead and see that the constructor takes in the name that the character is and then what movies they were playing in. All right, so I can see that Tinkerbell movies like Peter Pan, Return to Neverland are all stored in here. Same thing with Elsa and whoever else. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we want to compare which movies Tinkerbell appeared in again and show them. So in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go to character.java, I believe, and you can see that, hey, we have this public equals other object method here. Just in case you're wondering where to find it, if you go to documentation, if you go to java.lang, I believe, there is this object class right here. And you can actually look through this if you want. Excuse me, and you'll see the dot equals method there. If you click on it, it'll tell you exactly what to write there. Okay, so that's all there. So if I can copy and paste this into my Java file, then I can just overwrite it. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to try and override this equals method to go ahead and evaluate whether or not the characters are equivalent. So I'm going to essentially copy what I did in that slide deck. So the first thing I want to do is check to see if other is the same object as whatever it is I'm evaluating against. So that's the first check I'm going to do. So that's going to be if this double equals other, right? Because others was coming in, then go ahead and return true. Because if they are the same object, then that means the double equal sign should 100% work. Okay, so then the other option is what if this is not of the same class? All right, what if they're two different classes anyway? They're unrelated. Let's check for that. So if parentheses, exclamation point, not, and you're going to bring in that parameter other, and you're going to use this instance of keyword, and it's going to change colors, right? Character, right, from Disney. Then we're going to go ahead and return false. Because automatically, if they're not related, then there's no point evaluating anything else. Then the last thing that remains is, again, evaluate using the equals method because these are probably related and they might have the same attributes, right? I assume that they're going to have the same attributes. So is it the same color or not? And we're going to go straight into the return here, right? Instead of returning false, obviously, we're going to write over it, which is we're going to do before I get there, sorry. The point I was trying to make with all those objects under the camera is in this case, we want to create a new character object, right? Because we're in that class and call it other character. And what we need to do is we need to go ahead and cast, remember this other object that's coming in as a character object. So I'll say it again. Notice that the parameter is assuming that whatever I'm evaluating the current pen against is an object class object. But once we get to this third chunk, the only thing that's left is, right, because if neither of these are true, then the only thing that remains is that whatever other has to be of the same class as what I'm trying to evaluate against, right? So I need to reclassify or cast that character class back onto other because what came in is an object. So it only thinks it's an object class. I need to recast it. So then I'm able to go ahead and return the most important part there. Now I'm going to pause just for a sec. Okay, so then for the return, we're going to go ahead and take over false and type in the current object I'm trying to create, right? And again, we're going to talk about the name of our character, right? So you see how there's a name for the name of character. That's what we're trying to see is does Tinkerbell match the other things? So this dot name equals other character dot name. Right, I'm going to go ahead and run this just to make sure everything works just fine. And it did. So it says no character found. I don't know why. Oh, but here we go. Character found. Right, I'm looking at Tinkerbell and I'm evaluating which ones she's been in. And the fact is, it's Peter Pan and Return to Neverland and Tinkerbell, obviously. That's all there. I'm going to go ahead and test this. We pass all the tests, which is great. So I'll finish. And that's all good. Let me do one more again. So poems. That's another one we're trying to override using the equals method. So same deal, we're going to go to the poem.java. That's going to have the author and title of every poem. Library.java, just like I said with Pokemon earlier, creates the one-dimensional array called poems, pointing to the poem class. And then we're going to go ahead and use that to do whatever. But the poem class is where we're going to have the equals method that we're trying to overtake. Looks like I already did all this, so I'm going to delete it. And again, following the same kind of template, if you will, I'm going to check whether or not this equals other first, right? And if so, return true. All right, are these the same objects or not? If that's not true, then I'm going to go ahead and evaluate whether or not the other is an instance of the poem class. If they're not instances of each other, then I'm going to go ahead and return false because they probably can't be related, right? Lastly, if none of those two trigger, then the return I'm going to go with is, oh, before I go to the return, I did the same thing. Remember, we came in as an object class, so I need to reclassify or cast other as this Disney character. So I'm going to go ahead and do, sorry, not Disney. What am I doing? I'm on poem, right? So poem, other poem, I guess, equals, we're going to cast that object called other there. And then we can go and return this dot. I think this one we're trying to compare the two authors the same, like that. Let's go ahead and run it. Hopefully I have enough curly braces there. What did I mess up with? Other dot author. What did I mess up with? I did the poem class, author. Did I mess up on anything else? Oh, I'm so dumb. So it's this dot author, it's other dot poem, my bad. Other poem, right? Because we saved other or assigned it to this value of object called other poems. It's been recast or reclassified or cast, and there we go. So now it runs. Go ahead and test it. So that's how you override a object method. Or sorry, yeah, object method called equals. Okay, so then let's also do one more. So I kind of just blew past all this. But let's go to the dog class. Hopefully it's not a theater. Good. This one we're just trying to find the problem here. And you'll see like this is the easy one because remember how I said the double equal sign checks to see if these two are aliases. So if we go to the dog.java, the dog class, there should be, you'll notice here they cleverly hid all of the equals method that they overrode. But they wanted me to look at the find matching dog. Oh, in the pet store Java. I'm wrong one. Here you go, find matching dog. So we have dog defined, string result, this, that, right here, right? So if we have some sort of double equal sign, can we do something else, right? So it's telling you too, if you need help, that the equals method in the dog class returns true if two dog objects have the same condition, if you will, right? So how do we do that? Right now, all I see is if pet double equals dog to find, right? And what we're looking for is we need to use the dot equals method. So to use the dot equals method, all I need to do is just write over that, right? And set it as dot equals. Kind of like that. That should do it. And there we go. We found a match using it for Charlie. Succeeded the test. That's it. That's all I was doing. So hope this helps. I know it's kind of long. Thanks for hanging in there with me. And I'll talk to you guys later.